Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of LOL Library Unlocked. I'm your host, Lauren Mobley. You already know library life can be full of ups and downs, but you can always compete with me and my guests to laugh and learn. All things library, all the time. Or, at least until I change my mind. Here, I can guarantee you we will mix it up and lock it down. I hope y'all are ready for a good time because I'm so excited to kick off this week's episode with an EdTech powerhouse, my girl, Yaritza Villalba. Yaritza is an award-winning, globally recognized education consultant, presenter, and educator. Let's get into it. All right, everybody, you guys, I'm literally like dancing because I'm so excited. We have a very special guest today. Miss Yaritza Villalba is joining us. Hello.
Hey, everybody.
On my podcast, girl, we just laugh and have fun. It's Library Unlocked, but it's really LOL because I just be chopping it up with people and talking about whatever. Yeah. So I'm so glad you're here. Thank you for making time for this.
I'm excited to be here. Thank you for the invite. I think, how did this even come about? I think I commented and you were like, yes, let's do it. And I was like, okay, let's do it.
Let's do it. And before we start talking too much about, all the amazing things you're doing, tell our listeners who you are.
So
wait, before you even say that, let me give a little preface. Yaritza is that girl. So I think I first met you on Twitter. From just like spreading all this amazing information about technology. And I was like, she is really doing it, like keynote speaking in all these places and amazing presentations. So I was just in awe of your knowledge and all your generosity, trying to help other people get better. But okay, you tell us.
Yes, you actually summed it up. I was a teacher for 11 years in Brooklyn. I taught AP US history to overage undercredited students. That's actually how I kind of like started my work on Twitter. I started kind of like amplifying what my students were doing and basically saying to people, you can't say that our kids are not able to read. You can't say that our kids are not able to comprehend. And this is how I know that whatever you've told them in the past was wrong, right? Because my kids were overage, so they were spending 8 years in high school, which is double. And they were reading at a fourth grade reading level. But when they got to my class and we did project-based learning, or I had them act out history, they were getting 98 on state exams, right? So I went to Twitter to say, oh, y'all was wrong about my kids. And now let me show y'all what they're doing in my class. And then I became an assistant principal. And then I began to do some work with Microsoft with race, equity, and inclusion. And then that's how I had my first show with Microsoft, Ask Yaritza, Culturally Responsive Teaching. And I got to know some amazing educators across 6 continents. And that sparked my interest in being a global collaborator and really starting to create experiences where educators from different parts of the world can connect on being culturally responsive, but truly understanding what our kids need, right? Beyond thinking that it's about a textbook or assuming that it's because they didn't eat the day before. It's all about taking the time out to get to know who they are and what their interests are.
That's awesome. And it's so important as school librarians to be aware of our students and to help teachers as instructional partners. Do you work with school librarians?
So now in my role, no. But when I was a teacher, yes. So when I was a teacher, I worked at a historically Black school, Black high school called Boys and Girls High School. It was in Brooklyn, New York. It was the center of Brooklyn, New York. When I went to school there, because I graduated there, our graduating class was 500 to 600 kids. So it was one of the largest schools in Brooklyn, New York. And I went back to work there, right? Predominantly Black teachers, predominantly Black students roaming the halls. You talking about culture, hip hop, that was it. And when I became a teacher, it was like, oh, I need my kids to be in the library. I need them to know about computers because early on in my years, my mom, paid for me to take typewriting lessons. So it was like there were some skills that I knew that I had that my students needed. We went to the library for that. We went to the library because I needed someone to teach my students how to cite work, right? So that way when they're writing essays for me, it's like, you learned that in the library. Get it together, or go get these books, and don't really rely heavily on just the internet. But now in my work, it's kind of like whoever hires me, whoever feels like my work is necessary in their school district. So it's mostly I work with teachers, school district leaders, students, parents, but I have not worked with librarians yet. So if you're a librarian or your school district and you would love for me to work with your librarians, yes, I'm plugging myself in.
Please do. No, that's awesome. But I mean, there's so many research that you're able to provide. And so, what does your day look like?
Ooh, so today is actually one of my lightest days. Usually I have 6 to 8 meetings or at least 4 workshops virtually, or I'll do like a full day workshop in person. So depending on what I have going on for the week. So I map out my months ahead of time. So I already know what I have scheduled for February and March. And what usually happens is I'll get invites from, school districts in California or Florida or here in New York, and we map out what the day looks like, whether if it's a full day PD. Sometimes I do 2 to 3 days, depending on if I'm going to Singapore or not. So I do go out of the country for workshops. But if it's something where I'm like literally at home, I wake up, get my daughter ready, drop her off to school by 8:30, back home by 9 o'clock, have my first meeting by 9:30. From 9:30 till about 6 o'clock, I'm meeting. So it's usually consultation meetings. It's usually PDs, depending on if someone, paid for a virtual PD. I have administrative coaching. So right now I'm coaching 8 assistant principals in Brooklyn, New York. Now, as of last week, I added to my roster 51 instructors that I'm coaching in CTE. So my schedule now from starting the 18th of February until 2027 is going to look totally different. So yeah.
You are busy, but
Yeah.
you are so organized too. So I know that I'm not that organized. I like to, I play organized. I'm really not.
But you know what? It's forced organization, right? Because I work for myself. So it's like if I don't do it, who's going to do it? And if I'm not organized, then I'm going to be missing out on some work or some form of communication where, I needed to speak to this person or I needed to know that about a specific school district. Like there's no school district that I work with that I haven't visited in person. Like that's my number one rule. So like even with the CTE program, I asked them to do an entire tour of their campus. I need to get to know the culture. I need to get to know the environment before I even go in and say, hey, educators, I think that you need to work on XYZ. Yeah, no, I'm not an expert, right? I need to see you in your element and then say, okay, so now you choose what your problem of practice is. And then I can show you some things that I've done that worked, and then we can create some things together.
That's awesome. And so you kind of mentioned like the whole you got to see the culture of the school, and then that will influence your plan because each school is different,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I know that cultural representation is important to you, and so you're from Brooklyn,
Yeah.
but you identify as Panamanian, or you're from Panama, or your family's from Panama. Tell us about that.
I was born in Panama. So,
Okay.
so we migrated here in 1991. I was 3, so I was very young. I was one of the youngest kids. It was 12 of us that came with my mom and my aunts, and we settled in Brooklyn. So I'm a Brooklyn girl. You can hear the accent. The only time you really hear the Spanish come out is if I'm angry. But I am an Afro Latina because life itself began in Africa. And after writing the second book, Mckenzie's Bisabuela, we learned that my great grandmother was a daughter of an enslaved woman. So we know that our family's history began in Africa. And then she migrated to Panama, and that's where, we were all born. And then we came here. But growing up in Brooklyn, I've always said, I don't know, it was like meant to be because Brooklyn is so diverse. And Brooklyn is the only place that I know where I grew up on a block that on one corner it was a bodega. Across the street from there, you had a grocery store that was Pakistani. Across from that, you have the Chinese restaurant. Then you have the pizza store right next door to my building. So it's like you have this cultural, diffusion, and everyone is appreciating the differences that exist, and everyone is eating like from each other's tables, right? Even though they're restaurants, and we're learning from each other and we're respecting each other. So for me, that's what Brooklyn taught me. And so now that I have the opportunity to go around the world and learn about more cultures, I take Brooklyn with me. I take the fact that, I had uncles and aunts that weren't even related to me, but they would tell me, go upstairs. It's time. It's time for you to go upstairs. You got this white Italian man telling me to go upstairs, and he's like, I'm going to tell your mother. And I'm like, okay, all right.
And they don't do that no more.
They
It's
don't do
like,
that
don't talk to
anymore.
my kids. And it's like,
Things have changed.
things have changed. And I love this idea of, everybody having a seat at the table, everybody being friends, everybody communicating, sharing their culture. Now it's like, oh, this is my pocket, and this
Yeah.
is who I talk to, and we all look the same, we all think the same, and it's hard for us to imagine life outside of this bubble. Even within schools, sometimes they
And
might be diverse, but are the groups mixing?
ooh, you hitting this topic, and my eyes twitching because I'm like, oh, we going there.
Are we
Listen,
mixing? Are you
you
just
know, the education space is so fake. And I say that because we go on these podcasts and we go on the internet and we show these images of camaraderie, and we say, hey, like, we're diverse and we're here for the kids and we're here to amplify their work and we support our teachers and we don't want books to be banned in our communities. And yet behind all of that, admin and district leaders and even some teachers themselves are making these rules and regulations that are affecting the lives of our students daily and are literally taking away the rights of other educators and silencing their voices daily. And as educators, I don't know, it's like I go into different schools and I see exactly how their communities are. For some
mm,
reason, I don't know if I'm a magnet, but teachers would be like, girl, let me tell you. And I'm like, I'm all ears. I was like that when I was an assistant principal. And maybe that's why I probably was like, all right, this ain't for me, because teachers would tell me things and I'm like, dang, now I got to do something because you didn't tell me.
oh,
Now I got
I
to write
wish
this person
I
up.
wish I didn't know that.
I mean, listen, I had a teacher tell me before that she see dead people. And I was like, dang, now I got to get you evaluated. You done messed up my whole week. But that's a story for another time. I got to text you on that one. But listen, but you hit the nail on the head, right? Because you would think that a school building or a community is where it's more like family oriented, and it's not. Everyone is
Mm,
for themselves. And even in this consulting role, I was just saying this to Victor Hicks. Him and I are close, and I was like, in the Black community, it's every man for themselves. And I'm fortunate that, yes, I'm from the Black community, but I'm also from the Hispanic community, right? And so I see the best of both worlds, but I also see how in the Hispanic community, it's like, all right, you fall down, I'm picking you right up. I'm picking you up and I'm going to give you my last. In the Black community, I feel like we have to work more towards it, because for us, we're constantly feeling like we're competing. And
mm.
society has done that to us. We haven't done that, right? But that's what happens when you enslave people. That's what happens when you take away their civil rights and they're constantly fighting. That's what happens when you strip, the Black man from his house. So it's like we're constantly fighting to be a part of that community, but we're competing to be in that number one spot again. And that's with our schools, and it's just affecting our babies.
So you brought up some about the books. And as a school librarian, of course, I am all about empowering every voice, making sure that students see themselves in books, and that I also want to encourage our school librarians to, not self-censor and to think about the implications of choosing important books for every person.
Hmm.
And you're an author, so tell us a little bit about the books that you've written.
So I call them the Mackenzie's Adventure series. Mackenzie is my daughter. She's my 3-year-old daughter. When I found out that I was having a baby, the first thing that came to mind wasn't cute shoes. It wasn't the cute outfits. It was, how do I expose her to her culture in a way where I'm not depending on an educator to do it, but it's coming from home, because I feel like home is that first place where traditions and customs are taught, and then you will feel safe enough to let your kid out into the community, because then they know right from wrong. And so, like, I did what I normally do. I went to Twitter and I was like, hey, can y'all send me some culturally responsive books? And listen, we got like 90 something books. Like, I remember like being pregnant and just like reading every book, because we gotta read stuff before we read it to our kids. I gotta make sure I pronounce things correct. You're a librarian, you know how it is. And I was reading these books, and I remember turning over to my daughter's dad, and I was like, this ain't culturally responsive. And he was like, what you mean? And I was like, this ain't culturally, this is just a black character. Or this is just a Hispanic character. Or this is, I remember somebody sent me something from like a Hispanic wrestler. And I was like, this is just a Hispanic wrestler. And I was like, this is not culturally responsive. And he was like, so what do you mean by it? And I was like, well, it has to speak to who she's going to be, right? She's technically going to be an Afro-Latina. Her dad is Jamaican, but I'm Panamanian. My first language is Spanish. The predominant language in my family is Spanish. 90% of us still live in Panama. And so for me, culture means her being able to fully understand where she comes from, for her to fully understand that she's born in Brooklyn, right? So thinking about diversity, like I wanted books that was just colorful and led for exploration. And I didn't get that in any of the books. It was like, all right, this is another black character, woohoo, right? Or a black history book, woohoo, I've seen it. And so I remember reaching out to my friend Matthew Joseph, and he was like, man, stop complaining and just make it. And I was like, you serious? And he was like, yeah. And I was like, all right, give me 24 hours. 24 hours, I sent him the transcript. And he's a publisher.
Oh, okay.
He
I
was
know
like,
Matthew.
yo, this is perfect. Let's do it. And I was like, are you serious? And he was like, yeah. And I was like, all right. So from there, we began to interview folks to illustrate the book. And I didn't know that it would be like such a hit. Like, I didn't know that this book that I literally wrote for my daughter, which was Mackenzie's Time Machine, would go on to be used even in higher education, right? Because those African American figures that I named in the book, some people didn't even know they existed. They didn't even hear about some of these, African American scholars, what I call them. And then that turned into my grandmother becoming sick. And once again, I was like, dang, how am I supposed to tell my daughter about the matriarch of our family, the reason why we came to America? And my family was like, well, why don't you write about it since you like to write so much? And I was like, you right. So what I
Not the
did,
shot.
right. So I was like, you know what? I have to incorporate my family in this one. And so what I did was I interviewed my aunts and my mom, and I asked them, like, what are some like important things that you would want the family to know about your mom and my grandmother? And they all gave me like different insights about like when we first came from Panama, or how we used to do like game nights. And we do most of the same thing. We party, we throw a party. If you lost your tooth, we cooking and we party, right? We're Panamanian. We party. We celebrate everything. We celebrate divorces, marriages, like everything. Okay, we
Just need a
Hispanic.
reason. We just need a reason.
We just need a reason to come together and eat and tell stories. And so, like, I took all those stories together and I put it into a book, and it's called Mckenzie's Bisabuela, Mackenzie's great grandmother. And that was a tribute to my grandmother. And the idea was that when Mckenzie or the kids in our family grow up, they'll be able to read this book and learn about the reason why we're here, right? And the person who has made all this possible for us. She was responsible for bringing 12 of us to America. Like, she worked in a plastic container factory for 10 years to bring us here, saved all her money. So why not give her that tribute? And then because the Panamanians, the family in Panama was like, we found out you wrote a book, I had to write it in Spanish too, because some copies to Panama. And then that led us to this last one. And I think most of y'all, if you have heard of me, you probably heard of this one, Mckenzie and the Secret Library of Banned Books. And that came about because I was over hearing these books being banned.
These are amazing, amazing work. How does all of your books influence your perspective? So I feel like first, I'm just so in awe of you for saying, someone has done this, I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
And that's inspiring.
Thank you.
It's really important for librarians to, trust themselves and feel like if there's, something within their school that needs to happen, they might be the one to do it. I also appreciate that you have this relationship with your peers and colleagues that support you to say, hey, you should trust yourself and step out and do it. Those relationships are incredible. I know I've been so inspired by some of my friends.
And it's necessary. Somebody got to push us, right? We can't always push ourselves. Somebody got to be in our ear saying, "Girl, do that," and you on the right track. Just
a little encouragement, right?
Right. What's the worst that can happen?
Just try it.
Just
try it. Just try it. But so for culturally responsive teaching, what does that look like in a classroom?
So it's honestly getting to know your students, is getting to know their interests, is getting to know their daily lives. Like for me, I was 21 teaching 21-year-olds. And everyone, I guess, assumed that it would be like fun because they're like, y'all at the same age. And I'm like, yeah, it's not fun because you're telling someone that's the same age as you that you have to listen to what I'm saying because I actually know a little bit more. And for me, it wasn't that take. I was so surprised that one of my friends never graduated high school. He was actually in my class. We had hung out that entire summer. I came back from college. And I was, we're back from college. I'm drinking. I know that I'm going to teach, but I started my master's program and I was like, party, party, party. And I'm partying with him. And he never said, hey, when y'all left me to go to college, I didn't go anywhere because I never graduated. And I walk into the classroom and I'm introducing myself. And I'm like, yeah, I'm Miss Villalba. And I see this kid in the back of the class and I'm like, can you stop playing with me? And he's like, what you doing here? And like all that energy that I had went down, right? And at first I was embarrassed. Then I was angry. Like, how could you not tell me we're so close? Then I was like, oh, hell no, we got to do something. And then in speaking to him, I got to know a lot of his challenges, right? What worked for me didn't work for him. And my mom always said it. She said, life is always a race. You may start off at the start line with everyone, but you're going to hit that finish line at a different point. And you have to decide whether you're going to go back for somebody or you're going to keep going. And for me, that was college. College, I kept going. I graduated, then I came back. But now that I'm back, I got to get my friend out because one, we got to party together, right? Now I can't party with you because you my student, bruh. But also, I need to help you to get a job and to get away from this because this is what's holding you back. So I used him kind of like as the catalyst for everything that I learned and I was still learning in the grad program. I'm erasing it. I don't even want to use a textbook in my class because these kids are not understanding the textbook. I understood it because I knew how to read and comprehend, but it didn't work for him, right? And so it was reimagining what education was. I got into creating interactive notebooks. That was my first time writing interactive notebooks. My principal went on to like order 500 copies. And literally every year after that, I only used interactive notebooks. I actually went on to self-publish those interactive notebooks because that's the only thing I used in my class. We no longer use textbooks. And it was an eye-opening experience. And it was my introduction to what culturally responsive teaching was. It was fully understanding someone's experiences, their likes, their dislikes, and taking those things and embedding it into the curriculum. So I knew that he was a money guy. I knew that he loved mathematics. I hated math. But there's math all around history. Right. And so it was just a way of me introducing things to him in a way where it made sense, or thinking about Brooklyn and then explaining, do you remember what happened on the A train? And, doing things like that. And he's like, oh, yeah. And I'm like,
the connection.
That's World War II. Come on. Like, or thinking about imperialism, right? Or thinking about white man's burden, and then just explaining it to him in a way where it made sense. And he didn't get that from other teachers because they were doing things by the book. And here I come in and I'm like, at first I was going to do it by the book. And then reality hit that my friend is in the back of the class and we need to party. And I know some of y'all are going to listen to this episode and you're like, All she's thinking about is partying. Yes, I was 21. All I was thinking about was partying.
That's
And
fair.
I was also and I was also embarrassed for my friend because now I can't call you my friend while we're in class. Now I have to be a
Mm-mm.
totally different person because I also didn't want the other students to feel like I was treating them any different.
Right.
So culturally responsive teaching is literally taking away anything that doesn't align to who your students are and what can relate to their past experiences.
That's so important. And I'm thinking about how my experience and part of the reason why I honestly left the classroom was because I could feel that it was becoming more scripted.
Mhm.
It was a lot of pressure from our admin to our classroom, our lessons should be the same.
That's it.
Yes. And I'm in my new school and I'm seeing that again, that they're saying, it doesn't matter who you are, but on this day, y'all need to be teaching this together. Yes. Yes. This is happening in Georgia. And I'm not the only one.
Oh, Georgia.
Um, yeah, in Georgia. And so I feel like libraries are a space for this creativity, for this cultural response. I mean, it needs to be happening every day in every
Yeah,
classroom. But as we transition or try to make space, teachers can use libraries as an opportunity to try to squeeze that in because I would love to hear from our listeners about if this is happening in your school because I know for one it's happening at the last couple of districts I've been in
that's
that they
you know
want it to be the same. They plan their lessons together, and then it's like, all right, we're doing this on this day, and we all on the same page.
that's scary. That is scary, and it's manipulation as well. Um, when I taught, see, I would feel sorry for the teacher who would have to do the same thing that I'm doing because I was one of those teachers that I would have this idea the day before and like order so many things on Amazon for the next day, right? Like I did like crazy things like game day and I would buy like board games that aligned to whatever topic I was doing. And then I would like create these Jeopardy stuff that I had my parents help me with. And then I would have kids do the VR glasses. So they're shooting guns. So if you walk in my class, you're like, this is chaos, right? But my kids are learning, and I'm sitting there
Mm-mm.
just assessing and listening to conversations. One kid is playing Monopoly, and he's studying the Roaring Twenties, and he's learning about it by playing the Monopoly game. Other kids are over here like literally just writing essays and catching up to work, and I'm just like doo 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 doo. And so to have this practice where you're saying that the teachers have to teach the same things that takes away from creativity, it takes away from innovation, right? These are those buzzwords that they threw around at us a couple of years ago, but it takes away from individualism, and that's what we try to push students
Right.
to be. So
And
it's
teaching
like
is supposed to be an art.
it's supposed to be an art, and it's I'm supposed to be able to walk into your class and take away something from your class. Every class should be doing something different so that way it could be more of an exploration. I should be able to walk into math, learn something from there, move on to science, and even though it's a different topic, dang, it's kind of like the same skill set. So I just learned two lessons in one day that now I could apply it to my history class. But if we all teaching the same thing, kids are going to get bored, and that's when you're going to start hearing, especially if they're taking two of the same teachers at the same time. Oh, I just did this as in Miss Joanne's class. I don't want to do this again in your class.
Mm.
Right. And I had students who they were taking, so I was the only US history teacher at that time. And so every kid that needed US history had me. Whether they liked me or not, you coming into Miss V's class, right? And you would hear kids say, "Oh, I don't want her, man. She's mean." I'm like, come on in, baby. Take a seat." Yeah, like come
Not
on.
you mean. That's funny.
And I was mean. I was mean, but I think it's because I knew what they were capable of. Like I
Mm.
knew that my kids were so intelligent, and so I needed them to take it as serious as I was taking it. Because I kept saying, we got a point to prove, and we got 4 months to prove it because that's how long some of my kids had. They were 21. You were already. This is your last year.
Mm.
You about to get kicked out of the system, and so we got 4 months to prove everybody wrong. So I got 4 months to help you get over a 90 when you just got a 16 last year with somebody else. And so I was that mean teacher. And then at the end, I would be like, all right, so how you feel? Miss V, yo, I wasn't even scared no more. And so you see these kids who are like walking in first, I hate history. And now they're like, I don't want to leave. And I'm like, you got to go, baby. You got to graduate, right? But that's what we do it for. That's what we do it for. And honestly, like, if I were ever to go back into the classroom, it would be to teach that same group again, or to have my own school that's targeted to that specific group.
You talk about teaching the 21-year-olds or like, helping with adult literacy, digital learning for adults. Why is that impactful and how do you approach that? Because I feel like a lot of times adults are harder to teach than children.
Yeah. So I'm going to actually talk about this a bit in my keynote next month in California. But as an immigrant, our tasks are a little bit different when we come into a country. Like, I was 3, but then I was entering preschool. My sister and my brother were older. They were already in school. And my mom's number one rule was, you don't have to worry about work. You don't have to worry about the food on the table. I got that. The one thing you need to do is go to school and learn, because you got to come home and teach me. So at a very young age, I was already a teacher. We was coming home, and the dinner table was where we ate and where you showed my mom what you learned for that day. There wasn't no, oh, I wasn't paying attention. There wasn't no, oh, I don't know what happened in class. You had to tell her something. You had to teach her something, because she was working 5 jobs. So the way she was learning was from her kids. And so adult literacy is really important to me, because that's how my mom was able to get her first job as a paraprofessional, was by learning from us. That's how my mom learned English, right?
Wow.
So being able to teach adults from wherever they are is important. It's like giving someone a second chance.
That's amazing. I know you felt so much pressure as a kid having to do that, but also like proud and that you're contributing and supporting your family
It was fun.
by helping you. It was fun.
It was fun. So my sister, when we were younger, she was a lot more fun.
Oh no.
It was. Now I don't know. You know, people get older, they get all strict and everything. Sending me all these different Bible verses in the morning. I'm like, girl, just say good morning. But anyway. This is, see, you can tell I'm the baby, right? But we used to play school. And so my sister turned everything into a game. And so it never felt like extra work. Like, I came home from school. My sister would pick us up. My sister would start dinner. We would do homework and we would play school. And so my sister would become like this teacher, and she'd be like, all right, let me show y'all what I did. And she'll show us what she learned in school. And then she's like, all right, so now show me what you learned. And then we'll do our homework by showing her what we did. So now it's time for mommy to come home. And it's like, oh, we got this down packed already, baby. Right? Because my mother doesn't have time to go through our homework. So my sister was that second person. But now it's like, oh, we got to present it, though. And you can't be wrong, because you got to present it in a way where now she understands it. So we already knew how to chunk text. We already knew how to differentiate. We already knew how to explain things in a way where my mom would make sense of it all, right? So it was always fun. I never seen it as something difficult until I would share this story with adults, and they're like, oh my God, for real? And I'm like, yeah, but as a kid, you don't see it as, dang, I gotta make sure I learn this from my mom. You're like, oh, I'm about to show my mother this. Like, that's how I was in school. Like, oh, my mother's gonna like this. Not like, I remember learning, poetry for African American History Month, and going home to my mom, and I would do like this Langston Hughes poem, and I forget what it was. And I remember there was a part where it was like, and it made a squeaky noise. And I remember my mom making me say that part like 100 times that night. And I just was saying, I don't know why I brought this poem home. And then I ended up having to recite that entire poem in front of Megan Evers College, because my mom put in a nomination for me to present that poem. So all you hear is in the entire auditorium, I'm like, it made a squeaky noise. And it's like, yeah. And I'm like, oh my God. But yeah, I didn't see it as work. To me, is what helped the family.
Yeah.
Like, Hispanics, we're big on family. Whatever way we can contribute to the family and to the progress and the success of our family, oh baby, we're gonna do it. Yeah.
I love hearing you talk. You got so many gems in there. Before this has been an amazing chat.
Yes.
You've enlightened me. I've learned so much, and I'm really excited about all the light and knowledge that you're spreading with everyone. Um, Before we go, I want to know what are you reading right now?
Y'all, I'm currently not reading anything, right? But I can, yeah,
Gas.
because you know what? Because I'm getting ready for some keynotes and some workshops. So right now, everything is focused on for the next 2 months. I have 10 in-person workshops.
Wow.
But I can share with y'all what I just finished, and this is my
Okay.
first time reading it. And the question is, where did I put it? Oh, here we go. So early on, and some of y'all might disagree with this, and I don't know if you've read this before, The Team
Oh
of
no.
Rivals. It talks about Lincoln and his strategic plan to have folks in the cabinet. And what I like about this book and why I keep going back to it, as you can see, like it's getting all messed up, right?
Right, you see, you read it 3 times.
3 times, y'all.
And this
So,
is a
and
thick book, y'all.
it's a thick book, but I go back to it anytime I'm doing strategic planning.
Mm.
And although it talks about Abraham Lincoln, it specifically talks about him hiring people who he didn't personally like, but he knew that their skill set was necessary to run the government. And I'm mentioning this because in education, we got a lot of drama and we don't like people. But the very own people that we don't like, who's usually the teacher next door, has a skill set that we need. And they have ideas that would enlighten our curriculum in our classroom and our students. You don't have to like a person in order to work with a person. You don't have to like a person in order to strategize with a person. And I always go back to this book because it's not about you as an individual. It's about the community that you're creating, and it's about the legacy that you're going to leave behind. Do you want to be remembered as the teacher who the students loved, or do you want to be remembered as the teacher who helped the school move forward?
Mm.
I mean, a little something. But The Team of Rivals, y'all, I just finished reading this again. If you haven't read it, I don't care what your opinion is on Abraham Lincoln. As a history teacher, this is one of those books that I always go back to because that man was smart.
Wow. And so don't be petty, guys. If that person has something that you need to work together to enhance.
Yes.
I'm
Yes.
snapping. I'm snapping. Thank you so much. Before I let you go, is there anything that you want to add? Of course, I'll have everything that we talked about linked in the show notes for our listeners to come back to.
Listen, I just got off the flu and it's been amazing to join you this morning on this call. Y'all, if you are tuning in, what I'm going to say is if you're not following Lauren, please follow her. Right? There's not one post that she's posted where I'm just not like, all right, let me interact with this and let me engage with this because it's all relevant content that even if you're not a librarian, you're going to want to tune into. And I'm also going to say, if you want to connect for anything, please feel free to reach out on socials or even on my website at McKenzie'sadventures.com.
Wait, no. We did forget something. We forgot to talk about your podcast.
Oh, my
Yeah. How did I forget that? We on the podcast and forgot about the podcast. Okay, tell us about the podcast.
So this is a new podcast.
Oops, sorry.
Bringing it back.
Bring it back. Well,
So this is a new podcast called Innovate Her with Yaritza. And it's a podcast that's going to amplify the voices of Black women in tech. For so long, I've been in this ed tech space. And yes, we've done some panel discussions, but I don't think that's enough. I want to hear from my Black queens. I want to hear from my Hispanic queens, my Indian queens. I want to know, what are your experiences? What's the impact? What's our call to action? How can we work together to make sure that our students are learning from us, but also from things that's happening in the world? There's places in Africa where young girls are still not allowed to go to school. How can we tackle that? Like, I have a global hour of code coming up right now with students in Nigeria, and the goal is to get some devices to students in Nigeria, right? So that's one thing to tackle. But there's some things that your communities are going through and experiencing that maybe if I can't help, maybe I know someone that could help. So that's the purpose of this podcast. Is I want to amplify your voice. I want to amplify your work, but I also want to be that connector. I think I do really good at pairing people together. I think I'm really good at like pairing people together for blind dates too. I just paired somebody. I better be invited to that wedding.
You're the matchmaker? Okay.
Yeah. But honestly, this podcast is going to be like me paying homage to all the women who have come before me and who are coming up next. I always get asked the question of how I got into ed tech and how, I'm still motivated to be in this field. And I think that by tuning into this podcast, subscribing and following us, and seeing the women that I'm highlighting, you'll also feel like you're a part of this community and you can be a part of this community. So that's the podcast, Innovate Her with Yaritza. I think we already have like 26 subscribers on YouTube. I haven't even posted the first episode yet, and we got like followers on Instagram. Yeah, I'm like,
this is what the streets need. This is what the people need.
Yes.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much again. We'll be talking soon because we have some things to work on together. You're so amazing. Thank you so much, Yaritza.
Thank you, Lauren.
Thank you so much for joining me, and thank you at home for listening. Please connect with Yaritza and check out her new podcast, Innovate Her, on YouTube when it premieres. Having a community and circle that encourages you to be better is crucial, and Yaritza is someone like that for me. I hope after this conversation, you have some takeaways to make your teaching more reflective of each of your students so that you can impact them all. Oh yeah, if you have a podcast idea or a guest, please let me know. Also, I greatly appreciate your shares, likes, and subscribes. Thank you for tuning in. I'll be back next week with my library sister, Jasmine Jones, for a talk about all things literacy.